Welcome to Orinoco Tribune's special interview with Dr. Raquel Pina, who will enlighten us on what is going on in Argentina at the moment and how all that is related to history and geopolitics. Since the self-described libertarian and anarcho-capitalist Javier Milei took office as the president of Argentina in December 2023, the country seems to have spiraled into a socio-economic abyss. Nevertheless, this may be nothing new under the sun, given that the nation has lived through a vicious cycle of alternating capitalist destruction and sort of progressive recovery, at least over the last 7 decades, if not more. In addition, Argentina is one of the countries that still lives the reality of British colonialism, apart from the neocolonialism, which is the order of the day for most of the world. So all these issues will be addressed in detail by today's guest, Dr. Raquel Pina, expert in Latin American cultural and literary studies and history. Born in Santa Fe, Argentina in the 1970s to a working class family, she was a first-generation university student. She studied at the Ohio State University in the US and currently teaches at the Columbus State Community College in Ohio. She has written numerous articles on contemporary issues in Argentina and Latin America, as well as authored 2 books, including El Sujeto en Escena, on the impact of globalization on contemporary Argentine cinema. At present, she is researching on native Antarctician people, descendants from Argentinian and Chilean parents, and their cultural significance for Argentina and Chile, within the framework of the bicontinental nature of these 2 countries of the Southern Cone. So, Raquel, thanks a lot for accepting the invitation and for your time. And if you want, we'll just begin with the first one, which I believe is quite obvious. And it is just like, if you could give us an overview of the present socio-economic reality in the country, because this is from October, like the figures that we have are from October, and both the poverty and the consumption indicators are terrible. But the government was celebrating a slight deceleration in inflation in September. So what is the discrepancy here? Inflation decreasing, people's purchasing power also decreasing. So what on earth is going on in Argentina?
Well, yes, definitely there is a huge gap between the vision of the government and the everyday experience of people in Argentina. In fact, I just came back a couple of weeks ago from a long trip for my research, as you were mentioning, Argentinians born in Antarctica, and I spent there like around 2 months. So I kind of like with that extensive staying in the country, even when I don't live there, I kind of like was able to, swim in the waters of everyday life of Argentinians. And to tell you the truth, the experience of going to the supermarket with my parents, or like when we were in Buenos Aires city or any other city, some of them that could be very expensive for people to live in because of the weather, the extreme weather conditions like Ushuaia. The supermarket has become really expensive for common people, for middle class people. Even for middle class people, it has become the prices have like gone to the sky. They rocketed, and the going to the supermarket there, like I had this impression that it was even more expensive than going to the supermarket here in the United States, and even I heard some comments of people comparing prices with Europe also. I have no idea, but I know that Europe can be kind of expensive, and kind of like the big cities here, like the super urbs like New York or LA, they're expensive, and that is what we have been seeing in Argentina. Now, yes, the poverty has went up like 11 points with Milei, which is a ton in just some months. And what is shocking is like some numbers, like for example, this is impressive because if we talk about children, children younger than 14 years old is like 66%, so almost 70%, like 2 out of 3 children are poor in Argentina. And this is important to pay attention to. Why? Because when you're poor and or destituted, being a child, you don't eat well, and that means less development, less brain, less of a human person receiving what they need to become a whole citizen, like somebody that can pay attention at school, somebody that can form himself or herself. And that is really jeopardizing the future of our country in terms of education also. So this is really important to pay attention to these numbers, of poverty among young children who do not receive the right amount of food, the right amount of proteins, are becoming issues later, in years later. Then 15 years old to 30 years old is 60%. Very, very high also, and that is the time when you, if you don't finish school, you don't go to university, you form a family, and so that's becoming problematic also. So if poverty has been increasing this much among young people, how are we expecting that families are going to be formed in the near future? And we know that Argentina is an extensive country with few population, so our density is really low. So we have to think on the future of the country in those terms also. Then between 30 and 64 years old, 48%. That means that workers are poor in spite of having a job, which is really sad. We're not talking here about marginalization or destitution. We're talking about workers and middle class people falling into poverty. And then we have 65 and plus, that is our retired people. They are 30% poverty now, which is terrible also, because when a person gets old, they need more medicine, they need more medical attention, they need to change their diet to kind of like prevent certain illnesses, like diabetes. They are common in old age, diabetes or heart issues, etc., etc. So in that sense, this means that we're risking our elders' health also. What else I can tell you? Well, the informalization of jobs, this has been a structural problem in Argentina since the dictatorship in the 70s. You know that our history has been crossed by a bloody dictatorship in the 70s, and all along the 20th century, we had seen our democracy interrupted by different terms of dictatorships. But the 76 one was terrible because it's the one that really cracked the country into the globalized world with a neoliberal regulation, and this means mainly an attack on stable jobs. So if before the 70s we have less than these numbers vary according to the source you have, but between 4 and 6%, now and with an informality of 10% among the people who was employed, right now we have 50% of informalization among the people employed. So the numbers are really critical here. And I found these from trustable sources, that in the great cities or medium cities in Argentina, out of 20 million people, and we have to think that half of the population of Argentina is settled in Buenos Aires province. We know that, no? We are a macrocephalic country due to the history of the country. And here we have, out of 20 people, 52% are informal. This means that they are either self-employed or they are employed but not registered with the government, so they will not have retired the possibility of retiring, you know, because those funds are not being provided to the state to create the future for these workers. And out of there, 46% are what is called en negro in Spanish. That means workers that are not registered at all. Therefore, they receive no benefits, no health insurance, no vacations, no children support like the laws of Argentina has established. 31% are salaries. I'll restart this sentence. 31% are employed in the private sector, and 70% are employed on the state sector. So those more or less are the numbers. So you can see there are 50-50% of how our workers' condition are right now. Informalization of Argentina has really reached a critical point, and that this really affects any kind of plan, future plan for any individual, or as I said before, the formation of family here is being threatened by this kind of uncertainty that the workers are facing, or the sustainability of a family, you know. Another thing that I can give you as an example is that, yes, there are sectors that have perceived a little bit more movement than before, than in the very recent years. Like, let me give you an example, is bakery. So bakeries, if you talk to the owner of a bakery, you are going to say, yes, we have, in fact, more customers now, they're buying more. But we have to think of this. The consumption of meat in Argentina, you know that we are eaters of beef, you know, they are known for our beef, and it's the lowest in 26 years. The consumption of milk, a derivative of it's a product of cows, you know, and it's like, and I'm sorry about our audience that for whom they are sacred, but in Argentina we have another culture, but they are less than 30%. So it went down 30%, sorry, it went down 30%, and vegetables went down 40% the consumption in the last year. This is only in the last year. So if we are eating less meat, if we are eating less, drinking less milk, and if we are eating less vegetables, what are we eating then? Well, our population is eating more bread. That is the closest thing that we have, that our culture, you know, like each culture has its own kind of food that they like and enjoy. Well, that is why the consumption of bread has seen itself increase. However, there are less bakeries than in other times. Along the last 10 years, many of them have been closing as a small or medium companies. You know, we have a huge sector in Argentina what is called pymes, that it is a small and medium companies, and they provide between 70 and 80% of the employment positions in the private sector. Well, we have been enormous diminishing. They have been closing since 2016, when we changed first from the governments of Dr. Cristina de Kirchner to Mauricio Macri. That was the first kind of like horrible drop in the numbers of pymes. Over 4 years, we were losing thousands and thousands of small and medium size companies. And these kind of started to be better during the 4 years of Alberto Fernandez, Dr. Alberto Fernandez. However, we had the pandemic, there was a star abroad that, to tell you the truth, for a Peronista government is not excuse, because when abroad there is this kind of like upheavals, we are in a Peronista government, we have been known for really accommodating and reorganizing and increasing our internal consumption, because you create for the internal market mainly. And this organization of Argentina economical production protects us from these upheavals abroad. However, and in spite of the shortcomings of Mr. Alberto Fernandez, the moment, the Peronista president at the moment, the pymes felt that they improved their situation. We recover some numbers, etc., etc. Now, after the election and the coming to power of Mr. Milei, we are again seeing those numbers reaching a critical red line.
But okay, the moment you mentioned about Argentinian people eating less proteins and less vegetables and like falling on carbohydrates, that is actually an indicator of poverty. I mean, it's considered an indicator of poverty and low indicator of human development indices in any country. I mean, it's true in any society that is going poor. So it can be seen. I mean, this consumption of carbohydrate going up is also not really a good sign. So the moment you said it, I got it. And then, of course, you mentioned also Alberto Fernandez, and we'll be talking about him in a moment. Well, you still have like a sort of Damocles, the IMF loan hanging on Argentina, which he recognized. I mean, it was illegal. I wrote about it. I read extensively about it when it was happening. So, I mean, it was illegal even according to IMF, but he still recognized it. So that would be one of the shortcomings, I believe. And that is something on which we'll be focusing now. And that is simply this question, that how could a person like Milei become the president of a country like Argentina? This is a question that we at Orinoco Tribune have been asked by our readers everywhere, especially in Europe, but everywhere. That how come Milei becomes the president of Argentina? And I would, of course, say that the previous government of Alberto Fernandez definitely had some shortcomings, and I suppose you will focus on them, but of course also on the other factors. Like what were the factors that led to the rise of a person like this in Argentina?
Well, there are a number of factors that we can mention here, and I will try to not to overwhelm you with a lot of information, but there are several things to consider. First of all, there is a crisis of representation in Argentina. And if we continue like this, what I foresee for the future is that we probably will reach the levels of that we had in 2001. If our audience remember, if you remember, 2001 was an explosion. It was the people coming to the street and saying, we don't believe in you anymore. We want all of you to be gone. We don't care. And in 1 week, there were 5 presidents, each one in the line of mandate that our constitution allowed for was like, so remember, Mr. de la Rua left and all his government fled with him after an important number of dead people on the streets. And then other presidents came again following our constitution. So this was nothing illegal. It was the people petitioning the government, we don't want you as our president. And then the next one came, and we don't want you either. And for a week, it went like this until Mr. Dualde became the president of the nation. And he was able to stabilize the country for the next 2 years until we had elections. We came back to normality, and Mr. Kirchner was elected. President Kirchner was elected, and we started our recovery there. So, but what I'm telling with this is I wanted the audience to know a little bit of our history, because that was a huge crisis of representation. When what we are seeing here is exactly that. We are more alert now, and we are seeing that there is a crisis of representation, mainly now due to the shortcomings of the last government of Doctora Fernandez de Kirchner, and then of when we recovered when we came back to power, the Peronist socialista party came back to power through elections, again, the shortcomings of Alberto Fernandez. So there you have one factor that influenced a lot. We have to remember that there were 5 million people that didn't vote in Argentina when we lost to Milei. That is an important number of our voters that decided, okay, and you know, our vote is obligatory. So it's not nothing that you can say, oh, I'm not going to vote this time. No, you must vote. So there you have the signs of disaccreditation, you know, this gap between us, the people, and our representatives, which is an issue in a country that says we don't govern directly, but we govern through our representatives. So that is one major factor. What we are seeing is the degradation of the credibility of our politicians to fulfill the promises they make in their campaign. That is on one side. Then we have, I'm going to move now to the cultural level of all this. There is tremendous cultural damage in Argentina. And again, I'm going to mention this since the dictatorship in the 70s. This dictatorship, probably the audience know, probably you have some knowledge of it also. I'm pretty sure that this dictatorship, the results in human life was 30,000 people missing, people that died during the dictatorship, and then tortured people. We have had like long years, long decades of human rights trials, taking the genocide commanders to trial. The only country in the world that was able to do that after a bloody dictatorship like the one we suffered. The damage in the human beings' rights, the damage on life of people was huge. However, the damage on our culture, it was even bigger. And let me give you some examples. It was bigger than we thought. And that is the long-lasting effect that we couldn't recover. And the major one is the distrust among peers at all levels. Like we distrust, we don't completely confide in our schoolmates, workmates, neighborhoods, and even family members. Families has been split in the middle because some of the people, of the members of the family supported the dictatorship, and some of the members of the family supported the people who were being chased after, like the Peronistas, the leftist parties, citizens, etc., etc. And also the political peers, you know, distrust distrust of our political peers, and this kind of belief that the political adversary is an enemy instead of somebody with whom we can have some common ground and come together for the welfare of all the people, you know. So in that sense, the dictatorship, we didn't dimension and took into account these damage that, and the change was radical. The Argentina that we had before the dictatorship has, I didn't live through it completely. I was very young when the dictatorship came, but people, my elders that tell me about that world before the dictatorship is completely different from the one that emerged from the dictatorship, mainly because we didn't trust each other. And we became kind of like a schizophrenic society, a society that in the same paragraph you can tell one thing, and in the next 2 sentences you can tell exactly the opposite, and that was naturalized. The lack of justice in the next 10 or 15 years or almost 20 years that follow the recovery of the democracy, the transition times, the lack of justice to bring the dictators to justice and to recover the companies, many companies were lost in the hands of the dictators because they just took over the owners, they kidnapped the owners, and their companies were taken over by them. So there were a lot of robberies. No robberies. They were thieves. They just took your possessions, you know, away. And I'm not talking only houses and of particular individuals, but also complete huge companies like Papel Prensa, for example. Then I'm going to continue with the cultural damage done by the mass media. And what the damage that the TV caused on the heads of Argentinians, on our culture in the 90s, it's tremendous. It still has to be evaluated. And we don't have to remember that during the 90s, there were also the change of key laws of education. These laws of education finished or ended the kind of system that we have until the dictatorship, and later, you know, even during the 80s, and it changed radical the contents of our education, the system of our education, and how our teachers for elementary school, kindergarten, and for secondary school are formed. These reformations didn't do any good to the Argentinian education. We still are enjoying of good quality and very well known around the world. Our professionals are really required around the world. That's why when there are crises, there are massive migration from young professionals that were formed in our public universities. You know, we have free public education up to the university level, but each time we are in crisis, hundreds of thousands of our professionals that cost a lot of money to the people of Argentina to form, they leave the country and go to work for the transnational companies, so for Europe, Japan, and the United States. Especially the so-called first world countries are benefited by these kind of we call it fuga de cerebros, you know, brain drain. Exactly. So imagine that if you have the best of your people that is formed leaving the country, and then you have a system of 24/7 TV that it is really destroying the culture of Argentina, the identity of Argentina, fostering the erosion of community values, of education, counteracting, you know, an educational system that is also being attacked from the inside and by the low quality of the people that is being formed. Then there you have really a very dangerous cocktail there. You know, in 10, 20, and 30 years, you're going to see the consequence of that. Remember, we started this account in the 80s. So we are 30 years later of that, and this is the result. Critical thinking has been absolutely depleted, and it took over a culture of laughing at the other one, of individualism, of not taking into account the real effort that each person materially observe the other one doing. So there were a number of TV programs in the 90s, but one that was the very leadership. It was show much led by a guy called Tinelli. So I call it the Tinellization of Argentinian society, because it was such an impact on our habits, way of behaving, especially on the young people, that instead of praising the effort of a person, what was being praised and awarded? Oh, the one that was what in English, and I'm so sorry about this, the smart ass, you know, the one that really can trick the other one and come out of that situation winning something that he shouldn't have won, you know. And if you add to that also the eruption of internet and platforms like Netflix in the last 15 years, there you have the whole picture, the big picture of how our culture has been entered into dissolution. There is dissolution of our identity and emergence of the globalized Argentinian being, you know, and that's it's part of what I analyze in my book, Staging the Subject, the impact of globalization on the Argentine identity and the way in which we are formed as individuals and as citizens, you know. So for me, this is an issue of identity, and what or who our subject, our Argentinian subject, sorry, I'm going to say this again. It's a question of identity and what or who we subject to as citizens, you know. What do we respond? What is the authority we respond to, you know? And here is it's a core issue. Let me give you an example. In 2010, the government, with very good judgment, passed a law. Remember that in 2010, we still had Doctora Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, and a law was passed, an act was passed as law, establishing that from that moment onwards, we had to use the bicontinental map of Argentina. In this map, unfortunately, I didn't have time to prepare a picture for you to show, but it would be beautiful to be able to show a picture. But we will see that Argentina is a very extensive country, bicontinental, and a lot of sea platform around our territory. So we are more an insular country more than a Mediterranean country as we are used to think, you know, like a Mediterranean country, the Pampas with the ports to get out our grains or our meat, you know, to Europe. That is the imaginary that we have as Argentinians mainly, and that is taught in our schools. However, Argentina has extensive territory on the sea with amazing, enormous amounts of wealth of all kinds, from food to oil. And all that, it can only be defended if we know about it. So this map, the goal was to show that Argentina was a bicontinental country, that the center of Argentina was not Buenos Aires, but Ushuaia, and that our intention it was double of what we thought in our head. And in that reasoning, the Malvinas Islands and all the islands that are around this archipelago are Argentinian because of continuity of the platform. Well, the resistance that we have found on the part of the teachers, the schools, and even the bookstore that had to sell the material for the children to buy, you know, like usually the teachers say, bring for next week a map of Argentina. Well, they are resisting to sell a map that has been established by law that it is the legal map of Argentina. So, as I always said when I give conferences in Argentina, I don't know where this resistance comes at first sight, but we wouldn't even imagine the teachers that Sarmiento formed in the 19th century. Remember the president that created the school system in Argentina, the public school system, in mirroring the system of the United States, the pioneer teacher. He invited a number of teachers from the United States and took them to Argentina, invited them to Argentina to form the future teachers. And I cannot even imagine those teachers that he formed, or teachers in the system of the population, or even the teachers saying, no, we are not going to use the map that you, Mr. President Sarmiento, want us to use. It's unimaginable. in spite of that, we have in 2010, and I have experienced that now, 2022, 2023, 2024, in my trips, when I go to the neighborhoods bookstore to buy maps of Argentina, they still do not sell, they do not have the real map of Argentina that by law they have to sell us. And there is a lot of resistance in the school. So in that sense, that's an example of how much eroded. There is an erosion of our national identity, and that damage our sense of belonging. I hope I'm being clear with my ideas. I don't know if it's too much or you have questions.
No, yes, of course, there is a lot of things. I mean, one could write an essay from that only. But I have heard your talks and stuff where you mentioned this map thing, and this actually, if you, I don't know if you know it, but I think probably everybody knows by now. But anyway, last year there was this referendum in Venezuela. Of course, it had to do with maps because wherever the British are involved, there is maps. So there is a territory called the Guayana Esequiba that the British stole and attached it to their what is today the country of Guyana. At the time, it was the British Guyana, but anyway. So they just drew a map and stole that land, and now there is all this fight over it. And ExxonMobil is there, and of course the USA has military presence there, so it's a big problem. But the map, I mean, it was also to do with maps, and it started with like in 1954 or something when Venezuela changed the map, and that was a time of dictatorship. But still, at that time, people took that map, and in that area was shown as a zone under claim. And from last year, it was changed to, I mean, a part of a state of Venezuela. Another, and it was changed into the 24th state, although it is not under control. But anyway, and as far as I know, all schools have that map, like the new one already. So I think that is probably like you said, an erosion, and I also believe that it is a sort of a tremendous lack of socio-political education also, apart from the lack of national identity, and we all suffer from it. I mean, under neoliberalism, all countries have suffered from it because your democracy, I mean, the return of democracy was with neoliberalism. I mean, as far as I know, it was like Mr. Menem, and he started with neoliberalism. So it was like crazy, which I mean, it happened, I think, in Chile, in most countries in the region.
And
Dictatorships end, and
exactly, and you're absolutely right. In spite of the fact that we came back to democracy, political democracy, the problem is the economy, how we organize our economy, the production of what we need to live and to make our country better, and even Mr. Alfonsín, Mr. Menem was even more. And then we have a kind of like an improvement, a kind of like going backwards in neoliberal regulations, kind of like during the Kirchner's administration. However, there were 4 important laws, economical laws, that were modified, were passed, acts that were passed during the dictatorship, not by Congress, but because Congress didn't exist. They were just, like what they mandate to do. These laws of the dictatorship affected our internal economical organization, neoliberalized the country, and those 4 laws, they were never changed by any of the government. And those are the key vertebral column of our economical system, like, for example, the law of financial entities, and the law that says that transnational have the same rights as small and medium Argentinian companies. That is putting our companies really competing in an impossible race to win. If our companies do not have a certain level of protection, the transnationals can do whatever they want inside the country. Well, those are the kind of things that were never fixed for during our democratic years. So we appreciate democracy, and we really, each time we have to go to vote, it's a party in Argentina. It's one day, it's Sunday, everybody celebrates, everybody goes. We feel it's our duty. However, it has been, again, the the identification of our people with our representative having going down, since we don't see a solution to that. And you don't need to know about it. You feel it. You feel it because the economy, it's always struggling and never getting great as it should be for a rich country of like Argentina. We are much luckier than many other countries of the world who have extensive territories but poor resources, or extensive territories and a lot of population with scarce resources to cover for everybody. You know, there are many examples. Or, for example, there are many countries who do not have the system of public universities that allow for the formation of scientists. We are a country that has engineering universities that they are for free, and we have been able to even be one of 8 countries that put a satellite on the space. 1 in 8 in the whole world. Those are the level of our engineers. So there are other countries that are less lucky than us. We don't have an excuse to be in the situation we are and to show to subsume our population to the poverty levels we talked at the beginning.
So I think we'll just now talk about the crisis of representation, because that is also something big in Argentina. And of course, at this moment, I'm not going to talk about Milei or libertarianism is nothing but neoliberalism and capitalism, nothing else. So we'll not talk about that, but we'll be talking about who are currently in the opposition. And we'll particularly focus on Peronismo, because that is the strongest force, I believe. So, and okay, so I confess of being a millennial and getting all my knowledge from memes. That's a joke, but anyway. So I saw a meme that says this kind of thing, that there are Peronismos of all kinds, and it said it's from the left. There is Peronismo of the right. There is a political Peronismo. There is center right. I mean, there is everything. So how do you assess the situation of Peronismo especially, but you can also talk about the left in general? And would it be like Peronismo itself, because it is divided into so many sects, it's also visible. And so would it be able to present a united front against this libertarian and anarcho-capitalist Milei without diluting its essence? Because that sort of thing had happened in the past. I mean, even in your last election, when there was Sergio Massa as the candidate, and I was like, why is a person who represents global capital, finance capital, the candidate of Peronismo? So in this situation, can it not go to that situation, like selecting someone like Massa and just make the crisis of representation even worse?
Yes, well, here I'm going to try to take your reasoning a little bit around, and allow me to tell you that what you got from a meme, I can tell you that. Allow me to tell you an anecdote where, like, our leader Perón, where he's a main character. He was in an interview. He was given an interview, and the reporter says, "But General, remember that he was a general in the army, you know, but he was elected democratically by the people going to elections, you know." This was before the 70s, before he came back to the country after the banning, he was, I think he was in Spain, and he said, "But General, you have talked about the left, the right wing, the center, and the Peronistas. Why don't you talk about the Peronistas?" And his answer was, "Oh, my dear, because we are all Peronistas." Meaning what? Meaning that in Argentina, being a neo-colonial country, that means a country that has political independence but not economical dependence, you cannot use the categories that you use for European countries. Remember, the left and the right and the center as categories, political categories were born out of the history, stem out of the inner history of Europe. So in Argentina, it's a question of identity. Again, we come back to the question of identity. Being a Peronista means being a nationalist. Means that I will fight with all my forces and all my resources and all my intelligence to achieve the better, the widest good for the people, welfare for the people, the happiness of the people. And we are going to administrate the resources for the happiness of our people. And social justice is a main, it's a big thing for us. We think of education for all, we think of health for all, we think on food for all, and that we become the most equal society that we can achieve. And for that, we need that the basics are needed: food, clothes, education, and health. And our identity also goes around working. The worker is our symbol. We the people are workers. Now, when you take away our jobs, you are taking away our identity. And in that sense, the contradictions we see in the Partido Justicialista, okay, that we have to separate from the Peronista movement. The Partido Justicialista, the party, it's a political tool of the movement. And the movement is the organized community, la comunidad organizada. And the organized community has unity of thought, of doctrine. This that I was telling you, our identity is around being workers. I'm a professor at the university, and that is my identity. You can see it all around me, and when you see me anywhere, I am that. I'm a professor at the university. That is the center of my existence, not only my job, the center of my existence and my family existence. You know, my father was a polisher of furniture, a worker in a factory of furniture. So for us, furniture is special. It's not just a piece of something made of wood that you find in a store. It is what my father was and how he made his living to give and the living of the family, how we were able to go to school, to dress ourselves, and to have some fun if you want, like anybody else in the world deserves, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of fun with the family, and 8 hours to rest. So in that sense, what we have here is a huge confusion in many people of what is the Peronista movement versus the party, the Justicialista party, or the Justicialist party, that it is an electoral tool that allows for the best of the people or the people who consider themselves the best to represent the movement to be able to reach a position of power in the government, even being president. Okay, that we have a history of that. So it's that thing, Now, what we are seeing now, it's a lot of confusion between, again, the movement and the party. And the fragmentation that you are observing is due in the party. And let's say we have to talk these two things here. One thing is what is happening inside the electoral tool. Inside the electoral tool, we have a huge crisis because there is a problem. They haven't not allowed to have elections. So many of us in the movement are demanding the authorities of the Justicialista party to go for internal elections. We have presented our list. However, there is a committee that analyzes, if the candidates are good and this and that, and they have once again put down our list, and there is a unique list again. And that is the issue we're having inside our electoral tool. And with that, then you do not have the legitimacy to unite all the parts. Because we have another important principle in our party. We it's a democratic party. We need in internal elections. The list or the candidate that wins the internal leads, and the other one has the obligation, the ethical and moral obligation to follow up and support to get to the best of the proposal when the general elections come. So I hope I have been I have clarified the panorama here. Why this fragmentation that you obviously see, we all see it, is terrible. And we have been really frustrated with the party also, because it's not representing the interest of the movement, it's not following the principles of the movement, and it has been co-opted. And in that sense, we have lines of globalist trends, or lines of globalism entering and co-opting the party. And this this is what we call inside the country progresismo. So very different from the word that you use at the beginning in the introduction. You know, we are Peronistas. To be progressive is to be European. That is for Europe, that is for other countries, it's not for us. And we are not saying we are conservative at all. What we are saying is that we, the Peronistas, have a long tradition of national and Latin American doctrine, principles around which to build our identity, and that the party is not doing a good service to the movement at this moment. Not to mention that the movement has also been fragmented. No? So that is the kind of chaos that you see all around. And then when you make your question, you ask me, are you going to be able to achieve unity? Well, let me tell you that if the party enters into reason and withdraws from that hard position of not allowing the internal elections happen, if they do enter into reason and allow the internal elections, it will reorganize everything inside the electoral tool to be able to overcome in the next election, that it is in the coming year, the midterm elections, to overcome this issue that we are losing to Mr. Milei here. Now, regarding our movement, we really need to regroup. And that is what is happening right now. Right now, the movement is not from up, down. The movement is from down, up. So right now, we have to reorganize ourselves because, to give you an example, when the movement had achieved its highest point of unity, it was because the vertebral column of the movement was were the unions, because most of our people were workers, they were unionized, and then it was the easiest way to organize ourselves. If you think after these 50 years that had passed since 75 till now, 50 years, what has happened? The flexibilization of the workers means that half of them do not belong, do not work for a company or for a trend, a line of profession, and then they are not unionized. If 50% of our workers are not unionized, that means that the unions only represent 50% of the working force in Argentina. And then you have all these lines of work of isolated people, the entrepreneurs that are self-employed, people that work with the new technologies, people that are delivery workers, you know, they don't have unions. All the workers of transnationals in Argentina, they are forbidden to unionize. They are struggling to do that, you know, to get to unionize. So if you have all this happening, of course, we are going to be fragmented, but we have to revisit. Okay, what is to work these days? What are the forms of the jobs, of the work? What is the working force that we have, and how we can provide not only for the unionized citizens, but for the ones that are all alone, ways of organization. And that is what we are discussing right now at the basis. You know, we are trying to come back to these this kind of organizing according to the sectors, but then articulating leaderships and building up a way of getting the representation in our own electoral tool. That's the part. I hope it was clear. It's a little bit complicated.
No, but I do understand, especially the part about the unorganized workers, because that is also a consequence of the globalization, and all countries are facing it. Because I mean, my own India, once upon a time, it had like some 90% of people organized in unions, and now it's almost reverse. 84% are in unorganized sectors, which means that they're not unionized. And it's the same thing, transnationals don't allow unionization. They take you to court if you try to unionize. So all these problems, my friends in Mexico tell me the same thing, that they have like almost more than 50% informalization of workers. So that is happening everywhere. I suppose that it is also something that, let's say, popular movements, people's movements need to attend urgently. And maybe everywhere in the same way, because sometimes one size may fit all. I don't know, but that's just me. So I'll ask you about, since we have been talking about unions and stuff, we're also going to talk about that. But I'll specifically focus on students' union, because at least throughout October, we are seeing news reports coming out of Argentina of anti-government protests by students who were taking over universities. Like I think more than 40, they had taken over more than 40 buildings. And anyway, so the question is like, what are the demands of these movements? Why is this movement, the students' movement, taking place in the first place? And they had also asked for support from the trade unions, the central one, the CGT and all these things. They had asked for support. So is there any sort of unity between the students' unions, the workers' unions, whatever you have? And what is the situation of this movement? Because they were also sort of referring to the time of, I think they were referring to the time of Cordobazo and saying that we had all this unity at the time, we need the same now. So what is the situation of the students' movement?
Exactly. Well, let me tell you that there is, apart from the students, there are the retired people who are really making some noise in the media, in spite that they try not to cover
Yeah.
to cover them up, like not giving them a space in the media. But the retired people, and this is a consequence of our population getting older, like in the sense that there are a lot of retired people, and they live longer. So therefore, we have this possibility of them organizing and having the strength. And they have also seen their situation recover in previous decades, and now coming back to a point of like extreme poverty. And then, yes, you mentioned like a key point, a key thing in our movement is like the role of the unions. Yeah. Let's go back to the students. In fact, what you are seeing now as a strong reaction of the student, it started its history in Argentina in 1918. So our university system has been under reformation since 1918. And we have to think of this. Only a few people, children of very rich families that we call oligarchy in Argentina, because it is the oligarchy, like the 100 families that rule the country these days, versus we the people, and that's why there is no right and left, because we have oligarchy, it's them, the 1% that these days everybody knows 1 versus 99. We had always had to fight against that in Argentina as a neocolonial country. So in 1918, there was this university reform that changed absolutely the way in which the university system in Argentina worked. It democratized the system, and then we were able to enter to university and to choose the authorities of the university. Now, that was one first step of democratization. The second step of big step was during Perón government in 49, when all the universities, 48 and 49, where all the universities became free. And also they created a line of universities that are technological, the technological university of the workers. Right now, it's just the technological university because they were smart enough to take off the workers, but they are that's an alternative system of universities inside the country of engineering and advanced technology universities that it's amazing. In each province, you have your own technological university. So that was that widening of the system, you know, and the opening of the system to everybody. To everybody. It doesn't matter if you come from a well-being family or a well-off family, sorry, or a worker's family. You are able, if you want and you feel that you can do it, you can go to the university. And that's me. I am the result of a working family who was able to give me good elementary education, a good high education, and entering the university thanks to the public system that is free in Argentina. And therefore, since the beginning or along all the 20th century, we have had this movement of students who have been gaining rights and really are aware of what it means to have a university that works for the Argentinian people. Now, in the 60s, and this didn't happen in Argentina also, it happened all around the world, the movement of young people rebelling against a system of consumerism and based only on the material interest of the human being. That happened all around the world. It happened in France, it happened in Mexico with the Tlatelolco massacre. Remember, in France, they were repressed students also. Well, in Argentina, in Cordoba, it happened also. So we had even the taking over of not only the university, but the unity of workers and students, and the taking over of the downtown of the city of Cordoba. And well, of course, then they were repressed and there was like people being killed, etc., etc. But that was at the end of the 60s in Argentina. And it was, you know, playing the tune of all around the world, like the young people coming together with the workers and imagining a world that was an alternative world, different from what they were living. They were rebelling against the consumerism and the capitalist society, you know. So we are the heirs of all that tradition. Also in the 90s, the resistance to the the terrible measures that Mr. Menem took, the Menemato. No, it's not Menemismo because that would be a movement. It's Menemato. It's like a regime that really destroyed Argentina's industrial organization, the collectivity, etc., in continuance with the dictatorship. And let's not forget this, that during the dictatorship, most of the missing people were young people between 14 and 25. So there you see that it is all the high school and the university years of a young person in Argentina. So the resistance, the organization of the students, their link to the workers has a long history. Now, what you're seeing now is we are heirs of all that movement. We are aware of the importance of they are aware, the student, because I'm a teacher already, you know, like I'm older, but this is like their awareness of the force of nature they are in a society like Argentina makes them work towards this resistance, this movement of resistance. Of course, it's going to take time, but we also have to remember that during the mandates of Nestor Kirchner and Cristina de Kirchner, universities blossom again in Argentina. So the budget for universities increased a huge deal, and also there were research teams formed, and we have the CONICET, you know, that is our National Institute for Research and inventions and producing advancements in science is very important, very prestigious, and that was really supported during the years of the mandates of Nestor Kirchner and Cristina de Kirchner. Therefore, when you are facing losing all that, of course you're going to move and say, no, wait a minute, what are you doing? Because this is also not my job, not my career, but it's the future of a whole country, and we are part also of Latin America, you know. So in that sense, I think that this awareness, it's a big deal there that makes them move and defend the social territories that we have won over 100 years of struggles. Now, if the unions are going to come to a point where they realize that they have to accompany the movement of students and the movement of retired people, that is something we need to see. There is a lot of bureaucratization that we have to fight against. And I think that at one moment or another, the workers of each line of profession is going to realize that enough is enough. You are not representing me anymore. And now I really want this or want that. The movement has to keep going. That is something that nobody can stop from happening, you know. It can take longer because the bureaucracy is enough to put a hold on it, but when people say enough is enough, then we know what happens. So that is how I see the situation. Again, it's the result of sectorization, or each sector fighting for their own little, you know, battles instead of thinking of the big picture. But I do have faith that the Argentinian people, because of our long history, you know, of struggles, of fights, of being resistance and being rebellious, also nobody come and tell to an Argentinian, oh, you cannot do that. You're going to find the opposite effect if you do that, you know. Like, we're going to tell me I cannot do that. I will do it anyways, because it's my will. So we're a strong-willed people, but we also have this history of common doctrine, the common principles that I do have faith that we will come. We were going to be able to bring it back to life as the more we get organized. I think that the Argentinian people has its antibodies, you know, and we are working on that.
Okay, so now that we have talked about people's power, I'd also like to talk about the de facto powers in Argentina. They're mostly same in all countries, but I'd start with the judiciary because that seems to be the most like immovable wall or something like that has existed like this in the era of dinosaurs, or let's say something. But anyway, so I remember that all this lawfare, when all this lawfare case is still going on against Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. So during this lawfare case, and I think also after the assassination attempt on her, she likened the judiciary to a judicial party. She said that it is a judicial party and like it is acting like a dictatorship. So how do you assess the role of the judiciary in Argentinian politics, let us say?
Well, given the cruelty of our dictatorship in the 70s, I certainly, particularly as I wouldn't go that far. Certainly, as it is a menace to freedom. If you become an element that make too much noise or are on the way of the big powers, like it happened to Cristina de Kirchner. So although we can see traces or attitudes, I wouldn't go that far. However, we must acknowledge, we have to acknowledge that there has been a change on the mechanisms of subsuming the country to the iron ruling of globalization and globalization regulation, you know, and that is the judiciary system. It's known by everybody. It has been a scandal to in the last 2 decades or 3 decades that judges of Argentina, important judges, have been invited to have summits with everything paid by non-governmental organizations in the United States. That is widely known. Everybody knows about it, and that is a scandal in any country, and it was a scandal in its moment. However, due to the concentration of the media, like, there is always this kind of like putting cold paño frío, like we say in Spanish, on the upheaval. And it's known by everybody also that some elements of the judiciary system, very known, has been meeting in the south of the country, in Patagonia, with at the Mr. Lewis residency, an English gentleman who illegally has occupied territory on a lake in Argentina and has had his issue here in the States, criminal issues, facing criminal trials here in the States. Well, his residence there was the place where some of the judges and some of the judiciary workers, important positions of workers, met with President Macri. So in that sense, yes, they seem to be having tremendous power, and therefore behaving as if they were above the law.
So it looks like when judges behave, when judges consider themselves law or something, then that should be that is the end of social justice, at least, if not anything else. We can see that.
Absolutely, you said it. And let me add something for our audience. Let's bear in mind that in Argentina, we do not choose our judges democratically. They are appointed.
Yeah, definitely. Of course. I mean, yeah, Argentina is not Bolivia. And anyway, it has its problem also, but anyway, so I get it. Now, I think you also mentioned with the judiciary, you mentioned US intervention. It is there, it is visible, it's very visible. And apart from that, you mentioned the media, and that was going to be my next question. And that is the tremendous power of mainstream, well, it's hegemonic, let's say hegemonic media in Argentina. It also acts as a de facto power, although it's not a state power. So the question is, from where does this sector, the media, obtain its power? And what is the state of alternative media? Like, is it any position to act as a counterweight to the hegemonic media? And this is a question that we ask all our guests.
It's let's hope. Let's hope the alternative media, it's where they need to be for this battle. Well, the power comes from concentration, and for also the transnationalization of media, that is where the power comes. The transformation of international companies into transnational companies, where they uproot their capital and then they work around the globe above the control of the state. That is the main issue we are facing in each country. Each country is facing exactly the same issues, that the authority of the state has been eroded, and almost in some cases it dissolved in front of the transnational powers. So instead of being the state, the top, the kind of like the place where like everything should subsume to the rules of the state, and then you have international law, that is the regulation between or the regulation of the relationships of the states. Now we have transnational powers that unfortunately legislation is not controlling them. We don't have the legislation that have enough performative force to control these transnational companies. We haven't created that with enough time. And we are losing the battles one after the other one because we are trying to control the transnational companies of media and its concentration. Not to say any transnational company, but let's talk about the media, that now we are facing artificial intelligence. See what I mean? There is no way that we can reach, that we can catch up the way that the technology is really changing at a pace that we cannot, the law is not at the same pace. So the pressure that the globalized world and the organization of the global world has put on to the state, the ordeal, the chaos, have not allowed the state to be able to develop the antibodies to see what are we going to do with this media that seems to be local, that seems to be a lot. If you look into inside Argentina, you say, oh, but you have tons of channels. Oh, but you have a lot of newspapers. Oh, all of them come from the same source. So the huge concentration, it's a problem. Let's not forget also that some people, entrepreneurs of the media, had their gains during the dictatorship, well, like it was with the noble family and the production of paper in Argentina for newspapers, like back in the time, the printed newspaper, well, you need paper. And then it's important who owns the company of paper that produces the paper. And that is in the hands of one family in Argentina. And that happened during the dictatorship, So coming back to alternative media, is alternative media at the level of the battle they have to fight? At the beginning, I was very hopeful. And there was a moment that I said, yes, we did it. Especially when we were able to put another Peronista government in place. However, then we realized that no, we weren't, because that candidate didn't fulfill. This is Alberto Fernandez, didn't fulfill the promises. He even passed laws that were a disaster for the country, and he never listened to its voter, to the citizen. So I think that the alternative media is in a precarious both or in preparations of the people who are working in the alternative media. So we, as the time passed by, and we have to continuously face this concentration and not being able to come back on our feet. It's like the strength is going down, the preparation of the people is going down. So even when there are some elements that are highly prepared, there are the majority of the people are facing issues regarding technology, regarding the resources, regarding the preparation. We cannot keep up, And then we have the problem that if the national companies do not organize, the pymes, remember the small and medium owners, if they don't organize themselves, if they don't articulate their sector for the fight, for the struggle, for resisting and really demanding the government the place our national companies deserve, they should be the ones supporting the media, that is going to link with them, because commercials, you have to advertise somewhere. So see, if the companies, the national companies, are still trying to get organized, they are not paying attention to where they are going to advertise. And if they continue advertising in the big, in the massive media and the concentrated media, it's a vicious circle. See, so there we have a big issue, and that is a fact. I'm not speculating. That fact is stopping us from advancing to improve the alternative media in every way, in content, in preparation of the people who are working, and there are people who are working a lot. However, the general chaos and the general situation, it's tremendously superior in what we have to face here. So I hope we're able to get to that point, we're still not there.
Yeah, that one can feel. Although there are many good, at least radio channels that I listen to that seem to be good, like providing good news and stuff. However, I'll be asking you one thing. So do you think that Argentina needs media law? I think there was some discussion during the second mandate of Cristina Fernandez that about a law of media which intended to limit the power of this, or rather, more than power, the exposure of the hegemonic media and give space to alternative media, to state media, etc. So do you think that a law like that could help in this regard? It's just a
Oh,
question that came to my mind.
of course, no. And there you have a great point, because this law, the media law, it was amazing. It was one of the most discussed and democratic law ever happened to Argentina. The whole process of the creation of the law, it's something that deserves being studied at university around the world, because it's one of the best example of media law to try to control the power of the concentrated transnational media and how it influenced the head of the people inside the country. Unfortunately, the battle was lost during Macri, because it was just wiped off, and then during the government of Alberto, it never came back, and that was lost. Now, by this moment, when in artificial intelligence, what happens is that that law is out of date. So we will have to figure out an improved law, updated with the new technologies that are emerging and really kind of like running over us. Although it would be great that if we were able to come back to that law. Even coming back would be a huge step for Argentina. But as long as we are not in power, there is nothing that can be done
Of course.
regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah, I read about that law a lot later, because when it was discussed, I was just in university and not really into media. But anyway, so I do believe, I would be studying it at some point of time. Anyway, so now I think we'd come back to Milei and Argentina again. From media, we're just coming back to state power, although Milei does not like it. So how would you evaluate the foreign policy of the Milei government? And this has to be asked. We'll start with something more general and then move over to some specific things. So the first one is, how do you evaluate the administration's foreign policy? And do you think that there has been a drastic break from the past, or do you see some lines of continuation from the past administrations in general, including the dictatorship?
Yes, it depends which past administration you're talking. Well, what happened, first of all, what Milei administration is doing regarding our foreign policy, it's a disgrace in every sense. There has been a lot of ridiculous moments, starting by that, the less, the ridiculous claims of some of our important people there, that it's the face of Argentina to the world. But beyond that, we have to think that it's the first time that Argentina doesn't claim the sovereignty over the Malvinas Islands. It's the first time ever that has not been claimed. Any administration has done so, even the dictatorship. And remember the war of Malvinas in 1982. Even that administration, with all the horrible things that they did, they were claiming the territory. Sovereignty was not a discussion. Then this administration of Milei have moved away from neutrality. That has been a long tradition of our country. Latin America is a region of peace, and we are proud of that tradition of peace. In spite of the fact that we face violent moments in each country due to foreign intervention, we appreciate ourselves, or we see ourselves as a region, a peaceful region. And Argentina has a long history of neutrality. The third position that Perón established historically in the 40s when the Second World War, or what it came after, during the Cold War. Like, we had been neutral forever, and we have been also supporting the right of each state to rule itself and the integrity of its territory. So what now? We are not applying it to our own territory. We are allowing our territory to dissolve and be fragmented by foreign forces, and the support of the NATO actions, pellic actions in the world also moves us away from that neutral position that we have expressed forever. And then a desire to be part of conflicts that they are not our conflicts. That is also that desire that this administration has is not shared by the people of Argentina. So I think, yes, we are having some huge issues here that can put us really in a dangerous position in the world, because we are not a superpower at all. So that provokes a lot of uncertainty.
So, no, I would say that there were moments when, well, I'm not talking about the dictatorship, but very recent moments, especially 2019. Or maybe a little before that. I mean, during the time of Macri, he did participate in an interventionist group, the Lima group against Venezuela. So it was, it was like. So in some way, Milei seems to be Macri on steroids in some ways. But
and I agree with you. Sorry, I was thinking more in the direction of towards Argentina.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but you are right. Like, well, but Macri, it's like you said, Milei is what Macri couldn't do, and Macri was what the dictatorship or Menemato couldn't finish. So yeah, absolutely.
So there are some continuities, although there seems to be just in our face, too much in our face in the moment that
shameless.
It's very, very shameless. That's the word. So now I'll come, because you mentioned this of the region of peace. So there is a point, and that is exactly in Argentina. That's a region of peace. The doctrine of Latin America is a region of peace, and also a region free from nuclear weapons. These things are broken in relation to Argentina, and I'm referring to the issue of the Malvinas Islands. So, well, apart from being extremely important for Argentina itself, it is also a question of decolonization for Latin America and the world, because it's an island that has been, it has been an island group, and it's not just Malvinas, but there are other islands there also that are under British occupation for almost 200 years by now. So the question is that what has been the recent history, and you can start with Milei himself. So you already mentioned a bit that what has been the recent history regarding this group of islands, this Malvinas and then the South George, South Sandwich, whatever they call them, and why is Britain so determined on its continued 2-century colonization of the region? And I don't think Argentina is close to recovering it, but still, after the very recent handover of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, with the condition of the 99-year lease on Diego Garcia, which is also a US military base, you have a NATO base in Malvinas. So how close is Argentina, if it is anywhere close, to recovering this island by peaceful means, let's hope? So is there any hope of that? Not with Milei, but maybe later. And why is Britain so determined on maintaining, because it said that it will not give over Malvinas?
Well, certainly if there are antecedents, that is a good thing, So what you are mentioning in law, you know that it's all about the doctrine of the law and also antecedents, what happened before. So if there are something happened before in that direction, that is positive, of course, for Argentina. And we say, well, if that happened here, how is us different, you know? And in that sense, yes, I would agree with you, if not now, later. However, what we have seen in the last year, especially after the war, 1982, and after certain deals were signed between Macri's Argentina, you know, and Great Britain, like for Doris Duncan, for example, that it was a scandal, and this continuous attack in the media about like presenting our map without the Malvinas, or presenting the map calling the Malvinas Falklands, you know, etc., that has been also done by our own governments like Macri's and Milei's administration, you know. What we have seen is more and more occupation, not only in the Malvinas Island. They have extended to bases in they are all their bellic material spread out in all the islands, even the San Pedro Islands. You know, like the Georgias are not Georgias, the
Yes,
Georgias
of
are
course.
Pedro, you know. So see, like there is a whole nomination of the islands with Spanish names. However, they have been able to create this image in the mind of the whole world that those islands have English names, you know. So there is an occupation of the imaginary all around the world, and even in Argentina, they're called Georgias. Nobody knows they're called San Pedro, in fact, you know, but they are occupied islands. So the expansion of the occupation and the active occupation, you know, because it's not that they are there and they are doing nothing. No, they are also extracting a lot of natural resources that do not belong to them, you know. It can be seafood, or it can be oil, or it can be rare earth, you know, like now is very used in a lot of industries around the world, you know. And for technological advancements, those rare earths are really important, and they are just devastating that area that doesn't belong to them, and they shouldn't be doing anything or renting anything, because they are also renting, they're given licenses, you know, so other countries can also predate the area. So what I see is more and more effective occupation and devastation of the natural resources. And the other important point we have to consider here is that the Malvinas Islands are the entrance to the Antarctica. And you know that that region, that area, it's also in dispute, you know. And not only that, the possibility of the entrance to the Antarctica using Malvinas, but also what I already mentioned, the occupation of a whole lake by Mr. Lewis, Great Britain, a British subject, you know, súbdito, no? Súbdito británico. And we know what that means. If this person feels it's attacked, Great Britain can claim that they are attacking a subject of theirs, and therefore the country is at war with us. So that hidden lake affair is also a huge issue that we have to pay attention. And then not only that, but also there are companies, private companies occupying our River Paraná, you know. So not only we have territory occupied in the south, we have territory that is being little by little occupied in the continent. So to tell you the truth, if Argentina doesn't drastically change gears in the foreign policy and claiming their territory and the integrity, above all, the integrity of their territory in the near future, this is very dangerous for Argentina.
Um, uh, after looking at the map of Malvinas and of course the other islands, I also looked at around the world, and I saw something very interesting, that all the land masses in the southern hemisphere that are closest to the Antarctica from any continent, they are all either occupied by Britain or by the US or by Norway there is a Norwegian projection into Antarctica, and I was like, Norway is in the north, close to the North Pole. What is it doing in Antarctica? Or those countries were former colonies of Britain, and now they are in the Five Eyes I mentioned, Australia and New Zealand. So I see that even this island where nobody lives, Tristan da Cunha, in the middle of the Pacific, I think, or middle of the Indian Ocean, whatever. It's like middle of nowhere. Even that place is a US military base, and Britain occupies it for, I mean, it's a NATO base, so Britain occupies it for NATO. And it's so all this gives like it is like a ring around Antarctica, the continent of Antarctica, so that all those are occupied by the colonial powers. So, and it is in this context that I would like to ask you about your research, because it has got to do with people born in the Antarctic region of Argentina, of course. And this is also where the bicontinental mapped bicontinental country, Argentina being a country in the sea, all this comes up. So I'll now ask you, of course, about your current research in this context and the native people of Antarctica, descendants from Argentinians and Chileans. So when I first heard about it, it was very interesting to me that there exist a people of Antarctica. Although in our imagination, that is a landmass covered with ice where nobody lives, and where well, there are only like penguins and seals and these animals. So,
But they're
so
cute, okay? They're beautiful and cute to look at.
but no, I later learned that penguins are also found as north as Ecuador, like the Galapagos Islands and places like that. Anyway, so what I'm going to ask you is about the people, not just animals. So who are these people? Who are the people of Antarctica, and why is their history and existence significant for Argentina, and how is this, these people, their history, their culture, how is that related to Malvinas and other Argentine Antarctic islands that remain under British occupation?
Well, we have to remember that Argentina has a long history of occupation, of effective and continuous occupation of Antarctic territory. So exploration happened from and started in 1904 on the Argentinian part from before, but the first, base was created in 1904. And what happened is that since 1904, and we also are the only country that have this long history of effective and continuous occupation. We, in 2024, it's our 120 year, so it's a significant number to celebrate. So it was celebrated. And the history comes that during the government of Perón, General Pujato came with this project of creating a neighborhood in Base Esperanza. And he took the project to General Perón to create a neighborhood there with a school, a church, authorities, and families, Argentinian families, And in this sense, this pioneerism that he was proposing, it emulated the one that happened in the Malvinas Islands when Vernet was its governor back in the times in the 19th centuries. There were also this huge project where like families were asked if they would like couples, if they would like to go and live there, and there were a small group of families living there for 11 years until in 1833 Great Britain occupied the territory and kicked them off, and they lost all their belongings and they have to come back to the continent, And so in that sense, it's what Pujato was proposing was very similar to that big project of Argentina and Malvinas in the 19th century, and President Perón thought that it was a good thing to carry on, and he gave its permission. And then Pujato and then Leal were like the main leaders of all those settlements, and of course then during the when Perón is thrown out of power in 1955, the whole thing came to a halt. Pujato was accused of corruption, like they always do. He had to leave the country when in fact he has lost all his capital in the project. And the whole thing came to a standby. Now it was re-emerged at the end of the 70s. It was taken out of the drawer, and said and put in motion again and again. Families were asked if they would like to go and live in Antarctica, and that what happened. The first set of families, civilians, until then it was militaries that went there, or scientists that went there. But then there was these families, and as a result of these families living there, there were these children being born, with a total of 8 Argentinian children born in Antarctica in between 1978 and 1982 or 83. I don't remember the 82, I think, or 83. Well, sorry about that, but it's in that lapse of years that the babies were born. The Chilean babies were born. They did the same afterwards, and between 1983 and 1986, there were 3 Chileans born there in similar fashion. Now, during the pandemic, the Chileans closed that base, while Argentina kept the base Esperanza with the families, and it was as a result, it was the only school in the world that was functioning during the pandemic in the Antarctica, because there was no pandemic in Antarctica, So it was kind of like a fun fact that this school was open during the pandemic, while all the other schools were facing, the ordeal of the pandemic around the world. But yeah, my research is focused on the experience of the 8 native Antarcticans from Argentinian families, interviews to them, to their families, and to other people involved at the moment in those campaigns to Antarctica. These campaigns last between 1 and 2 years, no more than that, because of the extreme conditions of the weather. So the native Antarctican people, they don't live there in Antarctica. Sorry, I'm going to correct myself. They didn't come back to the continent because, in fact, when they left Antarctica, being babies with their family, they emigrated from there and came to the continent, the American continent, for the first time. So they came back again, and I said it again, they came to the continent for first time, and then they had their life with their family wherever the families were settled. You remember, they are military families, so they were settled in different places, and nowadays they are living, some of them are living in Argentina, and many of them are living abroad. So that's my research, like getting in contact with them, doing the interviews, and trying to see what their experiences as native Antarcticans, what their families' experiences is. And it's surprising, but most of Argentina doesn't know of their existence. So it's, and most of the world didn't know about their existence until recently, And the importance, if you ask me, for Argentina in the sense is that it consolidates our history of exploration and permanent occupation, and it makes the Antarctica part of Latin America, because Argentina is Latin America. Therefore, our Antarctica is Latin America. And so we will have a region that is bicontinental in essence, And regarding the claim of sovereignty, it's very important because it showed the determination and willing of Argentina to peacefully integrate that part of the territory to the rest of our country, and it adds the human dimension to Antarctica that, as you very well described at the beginning, we're not going to talk about the animals. A lot of people are talking about the animals, about what it can be done there, the science, the meteorological research, etc., etc. This has to do with the human dimension of Antarctica and the fact that Antarctica then becomes the area, the Argentinian area and the Chilean area, they become Latin America. So it has a human dimension to all the other lines of legal claim that we have on the territory.
Yes, I mean, with Malvinas itself, there should have been, like, there is from the Malvinas there is an Argentinian projection into the Antarctica, but it is in maps. You will see it's shown as Great Britain, so that's a big problem. I mean, with the thing that you mentioned about General Pujato and his idea of settling people in the islands, in the Antarctic islands, that just reminded me of something that I read from the Venezuelan historian Vladimir Acosta. He said that territory is protected by the simplest thing, people. So like territory is not protected. I mean, of course, territory can be, he says territory cannot be protected by law, cannot be protected by agreements, whatever you sign. And well, sometimes it may be protected by military, but the simplest thing to protect your territory is people. So it somehow relates to that. I mean, different people have been thinking along similar lines. And yes, I can also see the dimension of decolonization also coming from that. And I also learned about Argentinian occupation. I mean, Argentinian settlement in Antarctica or going into Antarctica, etc. And that it was in 1904. I learned it from a stamp, the commemorial stamp that I saw from 2004. I did not say it in 2004. I saw it in 2016, perhaps. But yes, 100 years of Argentinian occupation of the Orcadas del Sur. I was like, what is that? And then I looked up and saw that, okay, the British have a different name for it. But anyway.
They always named over our names. Like
yes,
that.
they did it everywhere.
Yeah, we have to remember that our tradition, like they were fighting against the Spaniard, the Spanish Empire. So it's like the British, the French, and the Spaniards were fighting not only one against each other in their own territory, they were fighting like
all over the world.
all over the world. And that is kind of like their tradition of war. And that's what I'm saying. Latin America is not in the tradition of war. We are in the tradition of peace and doing what every human community has been doing for thousands and thousands of years since we appeared on the earth, is moving our families or our clans somewhere else where we can find, you know, a nice place to live, food, and occupy the place in harmony with the nature, you know. Well, we have lost that harmonious part with nature. We have to recover it to come back to that. But I mean, the idea is that, you know, that we are following the tradition even of humanity, of like living in a certain territory, and the unique link that that you have as being born in a territory, that cannot be broken, you know, that has to be respected. And these 8 native Antarctican people, they belong there, and they should have the right to go back there whenever they want and as they want, or even if they want to have family there, also they should be allowed to do that, you know, beyond, because that is their birth country, you know, their birth land, and they belong there. They are rooted there in their identity.
Yes, and that will probably be also, like, we can probably also apply the principle of self-determination to that, which Britain claims to have over the Malvinas, but we'll not talk about that. So, but from here, I will actually go over to something else that you have also highlighted in your work, and not just about the Antarctica War, but in your work in general, and that is the colonized mentality among Argentinians. You also mentioned it towards the beginning, where you said that the globalized Argentinian, or what I have heard from people outside Argentina, Latin Americans, not Argentinians, who say that, okay, Argentinians are more westernized than us.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
So in this sense, I'll be asking you about the colonized mentality of Argentinians that you mentioned, and how does that colonized mentality clash with the political consciousness that Argentinian people also have because of their long history, first against colonialism, then against a dictatorship, US-backed dictatorship. So it's also imperialism and the current imperialism also. So colonized mentality and consciousness. How do you see that the two working out among Argentinian mindset?
Well, in fact, that is it's a key thing nowadays, because what the colonized mentality was able to do is to twist common sense. And that is the big battle that they have won now. They were able to conquer not only the conscious part of the mind of a person, but the unconscious part, the part that is regulated, that not regulated, but the parts where there are the impulses of the individual, and that's consumerism. That's how people consume more, because oh, I feel like this, or I feel like that, or I feel like eating that thing. Even if it's not right, you have the right to respond to that impulse, and you don't know where that impulse comes. The impulse comes from you not being harmoniously integrated into your community, you don't have your sense of belonging balanced, and you don't feel part, so you feel very uncomfortable all the time, and that produces anxiety, and that produces that you consume and consume and consume. And that is one of the major issues, and the problem is that the material world has a limit, and if it's not administrated, then it's not for everybody, and therefore you have as a product, you have what is happening in Argentina, where a few has a lot and a lot has almost nothing, and that clashes, of course, with this what you were saying, we are fighting for more of our citizen fellows have the awareness of our traditions, our doctrine, our principles of family, of organized community, of living in peace. It's harder and harder to really come to that common ground, because I was thinking the other day, what is common sense? Well, sometimes people think that is ordinary sense of the word. No, it's what we can sense together. So that what is common, because it's yours and it's mine, and it's determined for this conversation and this in between you and me, and between in the common ground of all the people that make up a community. So there is a huge confusion even on the concept of common sense, and if we are not able to come back to a common ground, we are in trouble. And that is where we have to fight the battle against individualism, against consumerism, against this constant feeling that a lot of people has, that if I am putting a limit, I am cutting or chopping off the liberty or the freedom of another person. Because people, the common sense is lost, even in what do we agree freedom is. Advertisement is selling us that freedom is that feeling, that euphoria you have when you consume. However, freedom is something completely different, and humanity has agreed that the community needs the norm, the limit, because the limit is what we have in common. Up to here, we can cross the limit or we can respect it, and then we can be good citizens, or we are going to be punished, or maybe not, because we get away, but in your head that limit exists. However, we are living in a society where it's impossible to interject a limit in our superego, because everything is blurred and there is not any more common sense of what the limit is. Therefore, as a consequence, we have individuals whose ego is huge because the superego is not limiting the growing of the ego, and Freud determined this map of our mind as human beings. It's the superego that is the introjected regulation of society, the common regulation that we all agree. This is the social pact, that we all agree on the limits. The introjection in the human mind of the individual is the superego. If you don't have that, if that is very thin, then your ego grows, and it's all alone against the impulses, the drives of the unconscious. And that is what capitalism and consumerism is conquering in this phase of capitalism. And in Argentina, because we are more westernized than the rest of Latin America, we were wide open to receive all that influence from the so-called central countries, and absorbed it as if they were our own society. So right now we are in kind of a chaos regarding identity, because the first thing that you're going to see crushed is your identity when even your unconscious is being occupied by all this mass media that we already determined that is huge and is invasive, and it's really replacing the national voices that we should have had at this moment strongly talk to the country. We don't have that. So there is the battle we're fighting. We're trying to rebuild our national voice, inserted in or as part of Latin American voice, and fighting against that voice really become a voice of reason regarding our traditions, identity, and common welfare and happiness of our people in front of the globalized discourses of absolute freedom with no limits, which really do not make any sense at all for anyone. But they look as the truth at this moment only because of the way in which the individuals are being shaped by all these global forces.
Mm-hmm. And it's common to hear the same things everywhere or see the same things everywhere. But of course, some people tell me that it is a bigger factor in Argentina because of that westernization. Anyways, you told the same. Anyway, and now I'll come to my final question, and of course, then you can make your comments also. That's not a problem. But the final question is, and it's sort of speculative, but how do you see the near future for Argentina? And that is because, I mean, Milei has not even completed 1 year. He'll complete it in December. But then, of course, he will go in 4 years, let's hope. But with the damage that he has done in 10 months, and he has 3 years remaining to do more if he can remain there. So do you think that it will be possible for Argentina to recover that cycle of recovery and destruction? So do you think Argentina has the possibility of going back to the cycle of recovery and really recover, not just going back, but recover in the short term or perhaps in the medium term if we are not talking about the short term?
Yes. Well, fortunately, as I have tried to communicate in this interview, we have what I call the antibodies, like in the people. The people are looking for ways, desperately looking for ways to regain organization, to try to see how we adapt and how we work out our differences. And as long as we have these core of resistance, and working it out, I think that there is hope for avoid subsuming the country to complete colonization, and fighting this fragmentation of identities with unity of conception, which is going to bring us also unity of action. As I told you before, those are the principles. We have to have that common ground. So when we have common ground, then the action is there is going to be unity of action, because there is unity of conception, therefore unity of action is easier to achieve. We must keep in mind that our main contradiction, again, is not right and left. It is oligarchy versus we, the people, el pueblo argentino, And the oligarchy has historically had very strong links with foreign powers. And that's why they are anti-national in our countries, because of that ties, because they are very comfortable in the position they are. So it's we, the people, the one who have to really come to the common ground again and get organized, and not allow the media to make of us, the people, masses, not to allow the media to convert us in public, or la gente, like it said. No, we are not la gente, we are el pueblo, we are the people. The public, the general public or the masses, they don't have awareness of national identity or Latin American identity. They don't care about that because they go with the flow of the globalized media. We, the people, we are the ones who have identity, and it's awareness, like you said. Now, regarding the damage, as long as there is no further cultural damage, anything material can be repaired. Even the ecosystems can be repaired. We have great universities with great professionals that produce knowledge and the resources of all kind to confront any damage done by capitalism. So as long as we don't fall further down in the cultural damage, I think that there is a lot of hope for Argentina to. We have to reconcile with our national identity, our Latin American belonging, versus wanting to mirror Europe or the United States, or any kind of fictional dreamy world that Hollywood or nowadays the new platforms are selling us, that is better than us. Nothing is better than our own people. There is nothing better than our people, that us being ourselves and creating out of our own human forces, and again, in harmony with nature, the world that we need for us and our children. So it's a lot of work because there has been a lot of damage, but I think that we have the antibodies, we have the elements that we need. We just need to find a way to make those elements to concur with our self-determination. Self-determination is almost the fifth element, if we want to quote a movie, the fifth element that will make the trick happen here.
Is, of course, thanks a lot for answering all these questions. It was, there were many and it was quite long. So if we have not treated something that you consider important, or if you wish to make some comment, of course, this is the time. You can make any comment you like, anything that we have missed or something that we should have considered, or anything else that you wish. And after that, we will close.
Well, to tell you the truth, I thought that the questions that you first sent me, for me to think about all these issues were awesome. I never seen such a set of so thoroughly questions, because everything was there. There is, in a way, at first sight, there is nothing missing there. Of course, we could go on hours and hours talking, stemming out from each question, other things related, and there are many, many aspects that we can continue discussing. But to tell you the truth, I felt like, oh my gosh, these are PhD questions. So I love the questionnaire, and I said, I'm going to save it because it's an amazing example even for my students, as a sample of like how you create a good interview. So to tell you the truth, I don't think there is nothing I can add unless you have something for me. But no, and thank you very much for allowing me this space and this time to, and it's my first interview in English. I hope that everything was clear enough, but for me, it's a great opportunity to to be interviewed by you and to reach out to an audience that otherwise we cannot reach.
Okay, of course, we are honored. I mean, I personally, of course, because of all those praises, especially given that I did not study journalism. And I would, of course, and Orinoco Tribune, as Orinoco Tribune, also we are honored because we have been looking for our interviewing an Argentinian since before the election, but well, finally we have. So it is also something very, it's like a milestone for us also. And yes, everything was understandable, everything was good. And so thanks a lot. Thank you very much. And I learned many things also. And I hope to be learning things from, well, all that you have done, or whatever I can access. So thanks a lot for appearing, for giving us the opportunity to this.